The volatility in silver, well, it doesn't want to stop. In fact, as you can see, since we hit our peak at the end of January of $116.61, we have lost half of that value and more because it actually intraday traded at over $120 an ounce that day. But since this big drop, I mean, look at this. We have seen two peaks again, one 93.78 in February, another one here in May at 87.51. But even since the May peak of 87.51, it has been a downward slope. But there is a silver lining, and that is that under $60 an ounce apparently is a trigger point for many big buyers. And that's what we are going to talk about today with our guest, who told me that after it dropped under $60 an ounce, many of his big buyers came back in to start buying silver. But the question is why, what, and how much were they spending? Well, we are going to ask that and more with today's guest. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are once again joined by Josh from Minot Coin and Bullion after a very volatile week and silver dropping below 60. But before we get into that, Josh, welcome to the channel. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you here. And I want to hop right into it, man. Last week we had talked, and when we were talking, silver was still above $60 an ounce. After we recorded, it dropped under 60 and it stayed there the entire week. And I want to know, the viewers want to know, Josh, how did your customers react to that silver spot price drop last week after it dropped under 60? What did they do?
It spurred a lot of activity. I had a lot of people coming in excited and buying at the lower prices. Very few people echoed or stated that they were necessarily upset for the downturn. They looked at it as opportunity and purchased. And one thing I did notice, some of my big buyers got back in. Meaning they made purchases again. And those were the people who have been on the sidelines as silver was at, 100, 90, 80, 70, even in the 60s. It dropped into the 50s. That spurred them to buy more silver. So we had several large sales this last week too. It was a very, very busy week.
So I don't want to ask you like too much internal detail, but when you say large purchases, can you give us kind of an example, an idea of what you mean by a large purchase?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, my perspective of that has changed over the years. When
Sure.
I was first starting out and silver was $15 an ounce, a $5,000 sale was pretty big, but that can't buy you as much nowadays, right?
No.
So I would say mid 5 figures to a 6-figure sale, I'll start using the word big transactions. So, 50 grand to 100 grand, and I'll start using the word large sales or big sales. So, but yeah, we had several of those. Nothing, really big. We didn't have any $500,000 sales or anything wild like that, but some of the big buyers have re-entered. So, they're much more comfortable at these numbers in the 50s rather than higher ones that they just sat on the sidelines and waited. And it looks, so far, they're looking smart for having waited.
Oh,
but we'll see if it goes lower.
Yeah, we will see if it goes lower because neither of us know. Those big buyers, when they come in, are they kind of telling you or giving you, I know you don't ask, but do they offer up information as to what caused, why under 60 was their trigger buy price? I mean, and then also, do they talk about premiums at all when they purchase? Go ahead.
Well, that was a question they had, obviously, where premiums at, what's availability like. Most of them led with either in a phone call or a text message, I see silver's down quite a bit. I think I want to make a large purchase. So they're paying attention to the spot price. They're not really in tune necessarily with availability and premiums, but fortunately right now, availability is pretty easy to get, right? It's pretty widespread right now, and premiums are low. So, for them, it was a no-brainer, low, I'll use air quotes again, low spot price compared to where we've been, low premium, and easy to get. So why wouldn't you buy if you had the means? And a lot of them took advantage of it.
Fair enough. So when you say availability is good, do you mean availability as in you ordering from a wholesaler, or is your availability coming just through your shop from other stackers that are wanting to sell right now?
Well, both. Wholesale availability is pretty good right now. I'll tell you quickly, I misinterpreted something last week. My wholesaler, Dave, he's been on the channel from Coin Huskers in Omaha. I needed to source about 1,000 ounces just to replace stuff that I was selling this last week. And I sent him a message. Hey, I want to lock in 500 rounds and 50 10-ounce silver bars. He said, oh, we're about out. We're running on fumes over here. So to me, that meant he was selling so much, he didn't have any product. I found out later that day, he was still able to take my order. He just had to source it through a next level wholesaler,
Right.
have them drop ship it. He didn't have any on hand. But what's happened in his market, he's buying so much. He's selling a lot too, but his buying is overwhelming what he is selling. And he had so much inventory, he's dumping it to the refineries, right? So, and he had just committed to dump a large amount of metal right before I asked what his availability was. So he had just sold it. Then I sent him the message. So at the time I thought, wow, we're getting to the point where maybe supply is difficult. It's quite the opposite, where, people like Dave, who has a retail and wholesale business, he's buying so much right now. He has to find outlets for it. I'm not seeing that so much in Minot. I'm seeing the total opposite. The number of people that are coming in to buy this past week, or I should say last week, well overwhelmed the people that were selling. We still had sellers, but nobody's coming in and selling us monster boxes. They might sell, 50 ounces. One person sold 200 ounces. That was probably the largest purchase we did last week. And that's not a large purchase. So, I mean, I can sell those 200 ounces probably in an hour, just in shop traffic. So, we're not to the point where it's difficult to source metal yet, because there's a lot on the wholesale channels. I just got to time it better with Dave and let him know my needs, so he doesn't dump it to a refinery. He can sell it to me instead.
So obviously I'll need to get Dave on the channel to kind of clarify, but maybe this question. The majority of the material that he is buying, is it coming through wholesale channels or through retail? Because he does both.
Yeah, a lot of retail. Dave buys a lot from dealers, and he can speak on this better than me, but being located in Omaha, Nebraska, he's really centrally located to a lot of, somewhat larger cities, at least way larger than Minot, right? So, I mean, we have there Sioux Falls, St. Louis, Kansas City, even Minneapolis isn't far away. So there's a lot of dealers in that region that surround him that use him as a wholesaler or a buyer, basically. So those dealers end up with too much product. They're selling it to Dave. They're shipping it to Dave. So he ends up buying a lot of stuff. And if he doesn't immediately have an outlet for it, in terms of wholesale, like selling it to me, he'll sell it to a refinery.
Yeah.
And that's what he was doing last week, pretty overwhelmingly versus what his sales were, but not because his sales were bad. It's just he's buying so much.
So, I mean, I guess, for him to have to be able to buy so much from the different shops, that means those shops must be in a situation opposite of yours where they're buying more product than they're selling, though, right?
Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So
yeah.
I wonder if your situation is unique to Minot, or if, I mean, obviously it varies across the country. I would be interested in knowing why people would get out of silver, at under 60 when they had the opportunity at 120. And Josh, I know the comments are going to come, and you do videos as well, so you see comments. I know the comments are going to come from people saying, well, when silver was 120, you couldn't get 120 for it. And no argument there. I agree. No shop was paying 120 when silver was 120. No. But you wouldn't have had a problem getting 105, 110, depending on the shop, right? So, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to take $5 or $10 back of spot, even though silver had skyrocketed. And now that it's 60, they're like, all right, I guess I'll sell it. So I don't know. Granted, I don't know what goes on in the minds of people. I think there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of people that FOMO both ways. They have fear of missing out on the opportunity to buy silver at skyrockets, and then they fear of, missing out on the opportunity to sell it before it drops even further. I don't know. Let me ask you this. Have you have any specific customers that have come in and said specifically, well, because it's under 60, I'm buying, and this is why?
Yeah.
Okay.
For a lot of people, 60 was a triggering point, but also 70 was as well. And it was was it 2 weeks ago that we broke below 70? So, I just wonder if this continues, how many are going to rush in when it goes below 50, if it does. But not necessarily giving you reasons, but just saying silver's under 60, I'm buying. What do you have? What can I get? What's the lowest premium?
So, Josh, a lot of people, I get comments from people saying, well, Josh often talks about what he sells for, but he doesn't talk about what he buys for. And while that's completely false, because we've actually had one video about 3 or 4 weeks ago now where we specifically talked about that almost only. Let's talk about spreads right now. What are the spreads looking like on 90%. So you're selling for -4. What are you paying?
I'm paying -9. So
Okay.
it's a $5 difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So you take current spot price -$9 times 0.715, and that gives you a times face value.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a $5 difference.
Okay. Now, what about generic rounds and silver eagles?
Anything generic secondary, I'm at -5. So that's one, or actually half ounce, 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 5 ounce, 10 ounce, kilos, and 100 ounce are all going to be a -5. So spot -5. I'm selling, excuse me, secondaries at plus $1
Okay.
or $1.25, depending.
Okay.
Fresh rounds, like fresh buffalo rounds, they're $1 more. I'm at 2.25 over spot.
Okay.
I would buy those at a -4, so $1 better if you had brand new product. But most of the silver that comes in is secondary, especially the generic stuff.
Now, what do you
Unless
mean
you
by
have, like,
secondary? Just so.
I can explain that.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. It's stuff that's, so a secondary 10-ounce bar would be one that's not wrapped and encased in plastic. So it could have toning, fingerprints, it could have dents, scratches, whatever else. I mean, somebody else has owned it and they've played with it, right? Or it's
Sure.
passed hands 10, 15, 100 times before it comes back to me. So anything like that would be considered secondary. Same with rounds. If, they've been fingerprinted or touched, or they're toned or scratched or scuffed or what have you. You can usually tell really easily if you open a tube of rounds by the one on top. Oh, yeah, okay, these are secondary. Oh, wow, these are brand new, fresh, whatever type of rounds. The same thing works with government issued coin, like silver eagles. Some people call them off quality. Some people call them impaired. I use the word secondary. They all mean the same thing. So it's uncirculated, essentially, right? Versus circulated. That's the difference between the two.
Fair enough. Now, what about silver eagles? What's your spread on those?
Well, for quite a while, I was paying spot and I was charging +6. But I'm actually going to change my prices before I open today. I've moved my buy to -2. Now, these are for BU eagles.
Yeah.
The sale price is going to be +4.
Okay.
So we're working off the $6 spread on eagles.
Okay. So your spreads are around 10%, compared to spot price today, roughly.
Yep, they're $5 or $6. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that pretty typical for most coin shops, you'd say?
Good question. You're the one who does the phone call videos, and
Fair enough.
I know we get their buy prices a lot. I think there's a lot that are working off of much larger spreads.
Yeah.
And I don't think you would dispute that based on the research you've done.
No dispute here, sir.
Yeah. So, 10% isn't, in my opinion, really unreasonable. When silver was $20, we probably worked off a $1.50 or $2 spread. That was 7 to 10%, right?
Yeah.
We're doing essentially the same now. In this market, it's just that spot price is higher. So, especially with the extreme volatility, with prices changing so fast, we had, was it 2 or 3 days in a row last week where silver went down $2 to $3 each day, so we got to protect ourselves. So yeah, I don't think a 10% spread is unreasonable. I think a lot of people probably are in that range, but there's some that'll work tighter spreads that do a lot of volume and are constantly churning and turning it over. There's others that maybe don't do as much volume that have to work off of wider spreads, maybe 20%, 30%.
Yeah. Well, 30% is brutal. 20% is brutal too, but 30%.
It is. Yeah. And we've seen those numbers in the calls
we have. Yes.
I mean, it's, I don't know. It's a bad look for the hobby, but there again, from a dealer perspective, I'm not trying to justify that because I think that is a little much, but I can understand why they feel they need to do that because they're probably not moving inventory very quickly. So, at that point, it's like, well, I don't really want to buy it, but I will, and here's what I'll pay. And now you're going to get those, those poor offers, and I don't know.
Shop elsewhere. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. Shop around, get another opinion at that point.
Right. So let me ask you this really quick about, spreads. It seems like, gold has a much tighter spread. Like, the average gold eagle is a couple of % over spot and you can sell it for a couple of % below spot. Why is it on something that's much more expensive, like gold, are those spreads tighter?
That's a very good question. It truly always has been, at least since I've been in the industry, in terms of a percentage. And, it's kind of funny. A lot of people who are new into the stacking hobby, don't necessarily grasp the concept. They'll look at like silver eagles, like, oh yeah, how much is a silver eagle? And today, like I said, I'm updating my prices. I'll say, well, they're spot +4. Well, what's spot? Well, I'll explain spot. Okay, so $4 over the ticker price is what this silver eagle costs. How about gold? Is that the same? Is that $4 over spot? I'll get that question a lot.
Right.
Like, no. Gold works off percentages, not dollars. And that's just how it's always been. We price silver in dollars over or under. We price gold in percentages over or under. I don't have a good answer on why that is. Since I've been in the industry, that's how it's been. But you are right. Gold does work off of tighter spreads. But if you sell a gold eagle and you make 2%, that's $80, right?
Right.
$4,000 gold. So, you would have to sell a lot of silver rounds to make that $80.
Speaking of silver and the big spot price drop last week, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but obviously, we've seen this, we were like, after the big drop, we were pretty volatile, but we ended up for like 3-4 months just kind of sticking around $70 an ounce, like in that range. And since it fell below that floor, it seems like it's kind of in another free fall and nobody knows where it's going to stop. Now, we don't predict spot price here, guys. We don't have a crystal ball. But do you think there's still room for it to continue to go down? Not will it, just do you think there's still room for it to do so?
Yeah, definitely. We're still quite a bit higher than we were a year ago. The world hasn't changed a whole lot in that year in terms of everything, really. Obviously there's other things going on globally, but yeah, I think silver could definitely go down further. I also believe that we could start to see we'll call it the dead cat bounce, where it kind of hits a bottom and it starts to spike up pretty quick. I can see either happening. That's why, I don't ever try to predict spot price, because I'm not going to be shocked either way if next week we're sitting here face to face and we're at $49 silver. We could be at 65. We could be at 57.99 still. I really don't know, but I feel, and my feelings don't mean anything, but I feel silver should be higher.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Really quick, I want to ask, if you don't mind, go down below and check that you are subscribed. Over half of my viewers are not subscribed yet. We would really appreciate the support, so thank you for doing that. Also, check out Josh's channel. It's My Not Coin and Bullion right here on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description below. Stack long, stack heavy, and have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time.